Welcome to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. Each week we talk about heart rate variability and how it can be used to improve your overall health and wellness. Please consider the information in this podcast for your informational use and not medical advice. Please see your medical provider to apply any of the strategies outlined in this episode. Heart Rate Variability Podcast is a production of Optimal LLC and Optimal HRV. Check us out at optimalhrv.com. Please enjoy the show. Welcome, friends, to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. I am Matt Bennett. I am here with a guest that I'm really excited to interview. I've got the June edition 2025 of the AAPB Journal, always mandatory reading for me. And towards the end of the journal, I found this great article by Dr. Lynda Thompson on the synergy between neurofeedback, biofeedback, and how it enhances therapeutic outcomes. And I just fell in love, and I'm so excited to be able to interview Dr. Thompson and talk about both the article and learn about her work in general. So before we move forward into your research, I'd love just to give a little bit of introduction on who you are and maybe what brought you to the neurofeedback, biofeedback field.
Right. Well, in what brought us, actually, my husband and I, so really my late husband, Michael and Thompson and I did things together. And in 1993, we started the AD Center or the ADD Center. And we live in Toronto. So it was pretty early days, but we found that the whole neurofeedback field was so welcoming, and that you immediately had access to top people. So we went off to our first meeting. We'd meet Barry Sturman, we'd meet the Lubars. It was just an amazing, welcoming field. And Michael's background was in psychiatry, mine was in psychology. And we both looked at each other and said, these meetings are so much more fun than, the American psychological or the Canadian psychological or the psychiatry meetings. So anyway, we felt it was a very welcoming field. We also felt that it had huge potential. We actually heard about it because I got a brochure that there was a non-drug treatment for ADHD. And my PhD thesis, 1979, had been on the use of methylphenidate for hyperactive children. Self-concept and locus of control in hyperactive children was the title of that thesis. And so anyway, it was a conference and a workshop in Florida in February. We live in Canada. February is very cold.
Good time to go to Florida.
Tossed a coin, Michael went down. And he came back and said, there is real science behind this. We have to look into this because he'd prescribed a lot of medications over the years and was very careful when he prescribed the Ritalin and other stimulants. But the non-drug approach we thought was a terrific idea. And once we found out about it, we were hooked.
Awesome.
We spent a year going around to workshops and learning about it and training with the Lubars in Tennessee, and it was just terrific. And started the AD Center subsequently, and never looked back.
I love that. And I find ADHD, having worked in school programs, throughout my career, it's very interesting the time frame that we're in. And I here in the States, one of our most popular podcasts is The Daily by the New York Times, and they've recently released something on ADHD, how we're rethinking it, the role of medications. Is it genetic? Is it environmental? Kind of going back to the nature nurture arguments and everything. And I kind of left that podcast with, we still really don't know. It's a label we put on something. It didn't get passed down as the 11th commandment to define what this disorder is. But it just seemed like a really interesting time. I wonder, was there anything that brought you to kind of focus in this area?
Well, if you're starting a clinic, it's it's the most common disorder in
Yeah.
children, right?
Yeah.
So obviously there are lots of people who can benefit from the training. And when you mention their heritability, the heritability of ADHD is 0.7.
Hmm.
There's almost nothing that's as highly heritable as ADHD. You inherit it to about the same extent that you inherit your height.
Wow.
Height
Wow.
has the same heritability, and that's well established through many twin studies and
Yeah.
such. So it is highly heritable. Parents don't have to feel guilty that they caused it, except through their genes, which isn't their fault.
Yeah.
And of course, it can be worsened
Hmm.
by the environment. And currently, it's worsened by the lifestyle. So
Yeah.
lack of sleep, anybody who's sleep deprived is going to have impaired attention the next day. And that's about a third of the world is
Yeah.
sleep deprived, right?
Exactly.
So, but our first publication was a case series of over 100 children and adults treated with neurofeedback and biofeedback for ADHD. So
Hmm.
we combined the biofeedback from the beginning. So not just breathing, which is, I mean, these days it's heart rate variability that we do with every client. But in the early days, there was breathing, but there was also electrodermal response, finger temperature. So the whole range of biofeedback. Sometimes you have to do EMG on the jaws to get a person to relax enough so you don't have so much EMG artifact when you're doing neurofeedback. But HRV, breathing, of course, is hugely important. And we're always learning new stuff about it, right? So I've got a couple of interesting tidbits that a lot of people doing HRV aren't so familiar with.
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear some of those, and bringing that to one of my favorite concepts of the article is the synergy that you talk about. Because going to meetings like AAPB or ISNR, like it kind of we sort of existed. There's the neurofeedback, there's the biofeedback. Me sort of being focused in the HRV biofeedback space, like I've just become fascinated of it kind of can be the homework for neurofeedback. You take that the step forward with the synergy, and I just think this is what you're giving folks. I think what we desperately need is kind of models of integration along with the talk therapy aspect of it as well. And I thought that was a really powerful thing in your approach.
Right. Well, we always need a multimodal approach.
Yeah.
Like HRV is fabulous for relaxation. It's great for stress management, but it's not standalone,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so you have to have a lot of tools in your toolbox. But HRV is one that has lots of research. And one of the reasons I think both neurofeedback and heart rate variability training are very powerful is that in both cases, you're training oscillatory systems,
Mm,
right? So in
yes.
the brain, you're training a lot of thalamocortical loops. And with the heart rate variability, you're training the connections between the heart and the nucleus tractus solitarius in the brainstem, right, in the medulla.
Yeah.
So everything comes together there in the medulla. So so it's also an oscillatory loop, right? So you have an increase in blood pressure. The baroreceptors send these messages, vagal afferents and glossopharyngeal afferents up to the nucleus tractus solitarius, and then messages come back along the vagus back to the heart, and it slows the heart,
Yeah.
right? Because your heart would beat over 100 beats per minute if it didn't have something slowing it down. So it's also a loop. And here's the thing: when you train an oscillatory loop, your results last, right?
So what
So
is there a why
if you're
behind that?
training,
Because
yeah.
that's an awesome statement.
So so the so if you think of regular biofeedback, there were a lot of biofeedback labs set up in hospitals in the 1970s, right? It was the big new thing.
Yeah.
And they could train people to lower their blood pressure, and it was amazing. But there was a problem. They do it in the clinic, they go home, the blood pressure goes back up.
Right.
right? That's a tonic system. It's not
Mm.
oscillatory. So when you train to reduce blood pressure, you got to keep it up,
Yeah.
right? But when you train for HRV, I mean, hopefully people will learn their breathing, they'll use it frequently, they'll calm themselves, but even if they don't, you've changed an oscillatory system, you've reset it.
Yeah.
And the same with brain. Like, why is neurofeedback considered level 5 efficacy? That means efficacious and better than anything else, right? So it gets results equal to medications. How is it better? No side effects, and your effects last,
Yeah.
right? With drugs, as soon as you stop taking the drug, you're back to square one. With neurofeedback, you do your 40 sessions of training. I mean, it's not a quick fix,
Right.
but you do it and your results last. You've got it for life because you've got a new set point.
That is awesome. So
Yeah.
when we look at this from, because I imagine there may be a few folks listening to us who may be interested in heart rate variability, maybe, you using some sort of, device or integrating a little bit of HRV, resonance frequency breathing, biofeedback into their thing. You look at it, and my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, of the neurofeedback world is there's a big investment that needs to be made somewhere along the line. Because while you can do HRV for relatively cheaply, I mean, you can ramp that up to tens of thousands of dollars for in-office equipment as well. But if somebody's maybe doing talk therapy, a little biofeedback, how would you encourage people to look into the neurofeedback side? Because that seems to be the one, with my experience, at least at conferences, that there's a payment plan involved for somebody like me to get that level of equipment.
Yeah. So that is a barrier. The HRV, I mean, essentially you can do it free. Just teach belly breathing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Hand on the chest, hand on the belly. So with little kids who would just fiddle with sensors, we teach them belly breathing,
Yeah.
right? So just do that effortless diaphragmatic breath, right? We can and tell them to practice at home. Put their teddy bear on their tummy and make the teddy bear go up and down as they breathe,
Yeah.
right?
My wife's a
Slowly.
second grade teacher. She does that in her classroom. So yeah.
Yeah. So the breathing practice is, very, very reasonable in terms of cost. I mean, you can buy an Aura ring, and that's more expensive. That's pretty pricey. But you have lots of apps. You have
Mhm.
apps for the phone that use the light from the
Yeah.
phone to do your pulse. So there are lots of inexpensive things. When you do neurofeedback, it's an investment in learning
Yeah.
as well as in equipment, right? But the equipment is getting less expensive,
Yeah.
and you can do a lot with single channel. Like, we started with single channel. You don't have to go out and get a 19 channel and learn how to do quantitative EEG. You can start with single channel and do a lot, because the brain works in networks.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're training at the top of the head,
Yeah.
location called CZ or CZ in the US, you're over the emotional brain. You're affecting the attention networks, which are very widespread, and and you're also over the motor strip, so you can deal with hyperactivity. So it's a really so single channel training, and you can get good equipment for single channel training that's well, let's see. I think it's around $5,000 to get some of the less expensive equipment
Yeah.
that's still good, right? So
Yeah.
so um so I think people who aren't afraid of new learning
Yeah. Yeah.
are going to give it a try,
Yeah.
right?
Because even for
And
me, it's
there's
like, boy, like just learning and like becoming an expert, I'll put that in air quotes, on HRV has taken several years to get there. And I look at the neurofeedback side of things, because I'll go to those workshops. I'm very fascinated in it. It's like, whew, this is a mountain to climb as far as learning curve, which I always find
yeah.
very inspiring and gives me energy too. But it is a little intimidating to to go on that journey, both price tag wise, but also, just like, okay, what do all these mean? These different waves, and what do they correlate
Yeah.
to? And then I see the raw data, and people can read that, like people read like the Matrix. Like I'm like, what's that? But it is a really powerful tool that I hope becomes more, inexpensive.
Hmm.
And but again, that learning curve is there as well for folks.
Yeah. But it's more accessible now because there are good online sources for it.
Yes,
So Fred
great.
Schaffer
Yes.
has excellent online programs for both heart rate
Yeah.
variability and biofeedback and neurofeedback,
Yeah.
at a reasonable price. So the entries, you don't have to spend a year like Michael and I did traveling to different
Yeah.
experts and yeah, yeah,
So you brought up with
yeah.
ADHD, you brought up the medication piece of this, and I know it's a topic that I know a lot of parents struggle with. Of
Hmm.
I'm getting this feedback from maybe at school or another setting that the symptoms may exist. Maybe I've gotten an evaluation, maybe I haven't, but the hesitation around medication in a system, honestly, here in the US at least, that will be, you can go to a general practitioner and walk out with, a medication just with a 15-minute visit at times. So
Right.
I'm
That's
curious
right.
how that plays in
Yeah,
to
yeah.
your thinking, because I think everybody would say, hey, if there's something where I don't have to do medication with side effects, that would be ideal. So I'd love to know, with your expertise, where that sort of fits into your thinking.
Right. So having a non-drug approach, I think, is very powerful. Fact is, most people haven't heard of it,
Yeah.
right? And the US, with your direct to consumer advertising for drugs, there was an article in The Economist in February 11th, Economist, and it pointed out that 1 in 9 children in the United States is diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah.
Like that is a really high rate,
Yeah.
right? And if you just go on Parent Report, it's about 10% of the population who would fit the criteria. If you go on Parent Report in Sweden or Norway, it's 3 or 4%, right?
Yes.
So, there's a big difference in terms of awareness, and also I think in terms of parents just maybe wanting quick fixes for their kids.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then as I said, the lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like I think the problem with screens is worldwide, but it's maybe a little more in the US. And I think nutritional factors
Yeah.
play into it as well.
Yeah.
Um, US diets aren't so great.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of factors. But HRV, we've always combined biofeedback with neurofeedback because I mean, those kids can be impulsive, and if you can teach them to pause and give a breath before they blurt something out in class, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
My wife always appreciates that, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and then I'm
yeah.
curious.
Actually, I'm co-author. The first book to have a chapter on neurofeedback was the ADD book by Sears and Thompson. So you may have heard of
Yes.
Dr. William Sears, Bill Sears.
Yes.
Actually, we can give a plug. AskDrSears.com is a very helpful website.
Great.
So so Bill and I wrote that book back in 1998, and it's still a classic. We're actually talking about finally doing an update on it. But the latest books on ADHD by people who were already experts in the 1990s, like Hallowell and Rady,
Mhm.
and uh, their new book, ADHD 2.0, doesn't even mention neurofeedback.
Oh, really?
Doesn't even mention it. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Why do you
Talks
think?
a yeah.
Why would you think, if it's so highly, indicated and researched back, why do you think that would be missed altogether?
Well, back in 2012, the American Pediatric Association published their guidelines,
Yeah.
and based on Cochrane criteria, they gave neurofeedback the same level of efficacy, the highest efficacy for treating ADHD as medications.
No, okay.
So this is 2012.
Yeah.
Okay. 2013, it was off their website. And it seems that the drug companies are big donors to the Pediatric Association's annual meeting. Yeah. So
Frustrating
there's
and not surprising
yeah.
at the same time. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
There are also some meta-analyses that have been published that state that neurofeedback is mainly placebo effect. And however, if you look at the authors of those, they're all people who have links to the drug companies, and their criteria, they set their own criteria for the meta-analysis, and they leave out a lot of the studies that show efficacy, and they tend to include studies where people have used a set ratio. So there's, anyway, that's a fine point in neurofeedback. But if you're lazy, instead of setting a ratio according to what that client that you're sitting next to needs in terms of how much reinforcement, you can set it to auto reward. So they'd always get like 80% reward.
Okay.
But then the brain doesn't really learn to distinguish between a good day and a day when they're, tired and out of it. So
yeah, it's one of the things that surprised me being, I guess I'd say I'm in the orbit of neurofeedback. That piece of it is the fight that's still going on against some of these preconceptions that it isn't a valid science.
Yeah, I mean, you have people say, I don't believe in it. And then you say, oh, it's not a belief system. This came out of research labs. This came do you know when and where they first showed you could train brainwaves?
I do not.
Published in 1968,
Yeah.
Barry Sturman in Cats.
Yeah.
Operant conditioning of brainwaves in cats.
Cats. Fascinating.
Right? So if like kids, when you give them feedback, whether it's HRV or neurofeedback, they're used to sort of magic, right? You flick a switch and a light comes on. But adults always say, what am I supposed to do? Right? Kids just make it happen. They get the reinforcement, right? They learn. But adults say, what am I supposed to do? And then you have to explain it's not about doing something. It's about a mental state, being calm and focused, right? So, and sometimes I'll say to them, cats can learn this. So I'm sure your brain can learn this too. And I have them read the little section in the ADD book about the research with cats.
I love that. So
I
think a lot of our folks who maybe have a foot in one world or the other, we talk about the multimodal sort of that synergetic approach. And I know it's individualized for everybody, so I'll give that up front. I'm just curious, like what does your work kind of look like as you're integrating HRV biofeedback, the neurofeedback, and also the talk therapy as well? As folks come in to work with you, I'm just kind of curious, as general, again, I know it's going to be different for everybody, but is there sort of a way you sort of would assess and then kind of proceed, again, knowing that you're working mostly on the ADHD piece of this spectrum?
Yeah. Well, Matt, the assessment is crucial.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to do a thorough assessment that includes the breathing so we do questionnaires, we do computerized tests of attention, one called the TOVA, one called the IVA, which has auditory and visual. We do of course, we do an interview with medical history and family history and all those things. We do computerized neurocognitive testing. We use something called CNS vital signs. Very good value. It costs maybe about $40 in administration, but it gives you these standardized neurocognitive tests for, verbal memory and reaction time and executive functioning and like a whole slew of things. So And of course, you do your EEG assessment and the breathing assessment. And then we do 40 sessions of training and we repeat it all. So we've
Okay.
got pre-post. And I think pre-post is really
Yeah.
important. Yeah. If we're doing 19 channel, we're very thorough. We triangulate. We have 3 different instruments for doing a quantitative EEG with 19 channels.
Wow.
And one of them is from a company in New York, Evoke Neuroscience. Now, the limitation there is they only sell to doctors. So psychologists or social workers are, ours is a multidisciplinary field, but they only sell to doctors. But in a 20-minute assessment, you get your EEG, your quantitative EEG, heart rate variability stats, and also Loretta source. So and ERPs, event related potentials, that tell you about brain speed.
Wow.
So it's pretty impressive. And then we use the one that's probably most widely used, where you do your data collection and you use the neural guide for interpretation. And then we have this neat equipment from Korea, from iMedisync, that has the EEG and photobiomodulation. So light therapy, light built into each site. So that's the third thing we do. So yeah, so we're a little bit we're probably more thorough than most centers.
You may have probably the coolest looking office space in psychology, I'm imagining.
Yeah, but we learned from every client.
Yeah.
And so here's an interesting thing to mention about heart rate variability training that we learned from our clients. Right. So when we're doing a training session, we actually have people there for about 50 minutes, and we and depending on the person and how important the HRV is, sometimes we'll do HRV first just to get them calm. Right. So, but they're hooked up for their EEG, as well as having a respiration belt on and a pulse sensor on a finger. So they're doing their nice training. We have this nice screen that Michael designed that works with the thought technology equipment, and it shows mountains. So you've got a blue mountain that shows your breathing in and out, and a red mountain that shows the heart rate changes. So instead of the steps, which is the accurate way to show the changes in heart rate, we've smoothed it. So then they just have to get their mountains going up and down together.
Gotcha.
Right? So they're watching this screen, and it also gives all the statistics for the for it, and shows their resonant frequency and things. And they might do that for 3 to 5 minutes, just working on that screen, getting nice and calm. And then they go and do their neurofeedback, probably reducing their tuning out waves and increasing their calm waves. It's called sensory motor rhythm. Have you ever heard of sensory motor rhythm?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And also decreasing busy brain, which is, associated with anxiety.
Yeah.
So this sensory motor rhythm, which is extremely important, it's what led Sturman to look at the EEG in the cats, right? Because he saw these cats were being trained to wait for a signal and then press a bar to get a food reward, to get some milk and chicken broth. Yeah. And he noticed that while they were waiting for the signal, they produced brainwave activity that looked like sleep spindles.
Interesting.
And he's a sleep researcher, and he says, why are these cats who are so alert and still producing sleep spindles? Yeah. Right? So then he trained them to produce bursts of, and he called it sensory motor rhythm, because he says, let's call it like it is. You only measure it across the sensory motor strip of the brain. Okay. And it's rhythmic activity, that the way it looks, it's like spindle-like activity. So this SMR is very important for calming, right? Because it's associated with being alert but calm and not moving, right? So we track everybody's data, right? Like you should be doing learning curves, right, with every client. So our staff noticed that during that period when they were just doing their breathing, there were changes in brainwave patterns, even though we weren't giving feedback on brainwaves. And what do you think the change was, Matt?
I would assume more activation in the prefrontal cortex area and
We're
less.
we're at the central location,
Yeah.
sensory motor rhythm.
Okay. Gotcha.
Sensory motor rhythm, right? So we're seeing increases in the amplitude of sensory motor rhythm
Okay.
when HRV training's being done.
Fascinating.
Right. Yeah, well, it was fascinating, and one of our staff, the smart gal who had first observed this and brought it to our attention, and then we'd start looking across all the other clients. She presented it at an ISNR meeting in Carefree, Arizona, and then it got published in the Journal of Neurotherapy. What year was that published? I think 2002. No, sorry, 2013. So Andrea Reed is her name. So it's Reed and another of our staff, Stephanie Neon. So Reed, Neon, Thompson, and Thompson, 2013. Effects of heart rate variability training on sensory motor rhythm.
Very cool.
Yeah, Journal of Neurotherapy. So easy to access. So that's kind of an interesting observation. And of course, it makes sense because we are a unity,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's not like the vagus connects the
Yes.
the brain and the heart and the gut, and it all works together. It is truly synergistic. So this idea of just train the brain or just train the heart
Right.
it's really ignoring all those links, right?
And then do you then have folks do breathing exercises between sessions? Like, do you continue that? I'm just curious what's going on? Kind of what homework do you give folks?
Yeah. Well, actually, we have a little publication that we call What Bodes Well. So BODES, BODES, breathing is number one, right? And then some online exercises like Brain HQ and diet and exercise, sleep and socializing, right? So we want them, we say, it's expensive to do neurofeedback. If you want to get your money's worth,
Yes.
think of these 5 things that bodes well for success. And breathing's number one. So we encourage them to do it. We tell them about apps they can get. And we also tell them attach a habit to a habit.
I love it.
You ever heard that?
Yes, I
Attach a
have,
habit to
for
a habit?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we say, I mean, there are some really successful practitioners who can convince their clients to practice 20 minutes twice a day,
Yeah.
right? If you're Leah Lagos, the charming Leah Lagos in Manhattan,
Yeah.
she'll get her athletes recovering from concussion to do 20 minutes twice a day of heart rate variability. I guess you know her book, right? She wrote
Yeah.
a lovely book too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Leah can get her clients to do it. I don't think most of my
Yeah.
clients would
I've never heard
set
anybody
aside the
else that
time.
can. So,
Yeah. So we just say, it's okay to do it little bits, right? So what are some of your habits? Like
yeah.
maybe you brush your teeth,
Yeah.
right? Could you think about your breathing while you're brushing your teeth? Could you use your breathing to fall asleep? Because it's going to help,
Yeah.
right?
For sure.
It's going to help if you do your 6 breaths per minute or whatever your resonant frequency is. It'll help you fall asleep. And then my favorite, which I use almost every day, is driving and coming to a red light, right? So I tell folks, I used to come to a red light and I'd be annoyed and my shoulders would get tense, and I'd have like 6 red lights on the way to work and it wasn't great. And now, ever since I discovered HRV, I come to a red light and I think, 6 breaths per minute. That means I can do 3 breaths,
I love
right?
it.
So
Yeah.
red lights typically last 30 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Or if you're at a main intersection, it might last a minute. So there's my red light.
Yeah.
I relax my shoulders. I let the air in. And 3 breaths later, I'm through a green light and feeling relaxed,
I love
right?
it.
And my attention's better. And I've had so many people say, breathing at red lights has changed my life.
Oh, that is amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love the
Yeah.
habit upon habit. Like, you've got to work that. I've done a lot like with medical adherence as well and other parts of my work. And it's like, where can we put that medication where it's like, what do you reach for every day, whether it's a cup of coffee, and doing that with, breathing as well, I think is such a crucial thing to work it in, because you need to feel it to get the motivation in many ways to keep doing it. And that's what I love about your approach is, get it at the red light and feel the difference in a maybe just frustrating, maybe be an annoying thing when you have to stop. Replacing that with a regulated nervous system is a great way to get that sensation and build motivation.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to where the kind of the talk therapy piece comes in. Is it, on one hand, I'm thinking about, hey, they come in, they get a little bit HRV biofeedback to regulate them. They do neurofeedback. Do they stay in the same office then for talk therapy? Is that a different practitioner?
Actually, we don't typically do psychotherapy as
Okay.
part of our sessions, but what we do is metacognitive strategies, right?
Okay.
So to do neurofeedback with the registered psychologist would be too expensive,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So we have a group of wonderful neurofeedback trainers who are the people who sit. I mean, early days,
Yeah.
I sat one-on-one with everybody. Michael sat on one-on-one. But as the ad center grew, then we hired neurofeedback trainers from very early on.
Gotcha.
So we typically, I mean, we've had speech and language therapists, we've had teachers, we've had lots of different professionals, but what we primarily do is hire graduate student material. So we get people who've graduated in psychology or in neuropsychology. They want to get some clinical training and go on and do master's or PhD. We've actually had 9 of our staff go on and do PhDs.
Oh, that's so cool.
So, and even more go on to do masters. So they're people who aren't afraid of new learning, but they're not therapists.
Yeah.
Right. But they're good people, nice people, and they coach in metacognitive strategies.
Gotcha.
So starting from the beginning, this is something that Judy Lubar used to do, the late Judy Lubar. She'd do some training on task. So in our center, the first 20 minutes would just be like getting feedback, getting in the zone, and then they'll do and maybe an HRV screen. We also have screens that show both the breathing and the neurofeedback.
Right.
So you can kind of watch and say, oh yeah, look how your sensory motor went up nicely when your breathing was all in sync there.
Yeah.
Right? And then so once they're calm and focused, it's a time for strategies. And that can be whatever that person needs.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a whole chapter in the neurofeedback book on metacognitive strategies.
Yeah.
I've got the neurofeedback book here. Have you ever seen the neurofeedback book?
I probably at APB, maybe. There we go. Yep. That's for our listeners,
the neurofeedback book.
Bible sized.
Yeah, Bible size. I don't know why. There we go. The neurofeedback.
There we go.
So
yes.
It weighs 10 pounds.
Yes, it's
right.
Yeah, it looks heavy.
And it's got a chapter on metacognitive strategies.
Awesome.
So those are strategies that it's all about learning how to learn and what you know about what you know. Metacognition. Yeah. Your wife, the teachers, I've doubtless heard about metacognition. So the reason we've done that from the start is that neurofeedback takes time.
Yeah.
Right? So if you want them to have some immediate reward, give them a strategy that they can use the next day in the classroom.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So our strategies will range from reading strategies, listening strategies. If you've got a child with Asperger's, like on the spectrum with Asperger's, we'll teach them social skills, or we might let them watch a little vignette and then talk about it, right? Social stories. So if you're dealing with an executive, it's usually time management.
Yeah.
Right? Adults with Asperger's, we have this book by Temple Grandin, and and we'll look
I
at a
love that.
chapter.
In
Let them.
Colorado, my neighbor, so to speak. I don't know her
Okay.
personally, but I'm proud to call her a fellow Coloradoan. So
Yeah. So like, there's a chapter in that book called "People Don't Always Say What They Mean,"
yeah,
right? And that's something you have to share with an adult with Asperger's, right?
yeah,
Because they'll be socially naive. Um, so we match the strategies to whatever the person needs, but that's different than doing psychotherapy,
yeah.
right?
Gotcha.
There's the occasional client who does their, and you'd be surprised at how many conditions improve just with their neurofeedback. Like there's
Mm,
and our heart rate variability. Like there's a self-efficacy
yeah,
when a person learns to regulate their
yeah,
emotions with
yeah,
breathing, right? Like they just feel like a more effective person,
yeah,
and they're probably going to be more cheerful.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and
I
then I
don't.
love the lifestyle part on that, on top of that, which is I think way, and I did too as a young psychotherapist, never talked about sleep, nutrition, movement, like healthy breathing
Yeah,
has made my list now the top
yeah, yeah.
four. Like didn't talk about that, and now what do I know? That nervous system I was trying to help regulate through talk therapy, they were dysregulating the work that we were trying to do together, and really difficult work around, especially when I was doing trauma work,
Mm-hmm.
because they were getting like 5 hours of sleep at night. And
Right.
no matter how good a therapist I was, I wasn't I wasn't going to maximize our impact or outcomes if that was going to, if I didn't talk to them about those aspects.
Yeah. You've got to get at least 7 hours of sleep, right?
Yes,
5 bad
absolutely.
things happen if you don't get 7 hours of sleep. But speaking about breathing, I don't know, like maybe because of Michael's medical background, we always tracked some other literature too.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a very recent article in a journal called Current Biology that was reviewed in Medscape, because Medscape's something I still look at regularly.
Yeah.
And you were talking about mood. So this was a really interesting study where they took 100 people and they just measured their breathing using a cannula,
Yeah.
and then had this sophisticated software to analyze all kinds of 24 different measures, right? So they were looking at things like, how you shift from one nostril to the other
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
breathe.
Yeah.
So they actually have charts that show that, left nostril, right nostril,
Yeah.
how much breath in each one, etc. But they also looked at some other things, not just that airflow. And they showed, for example, I mean, they were healthy, 100 healthy
Yeah.
subjects, right? But they also gave them measures like depression inventory,
Mhm.
right? So nobody was depressed, but some people were happier than others.
Yeah.
And what do you think they found in terms of breathing rate and mood?
I would assume the slower the breathing rate, the better the mood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the chart that they produced showed that the faster breathing rate was associated with higher rates of depression, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, just what you said, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
on top of that,
not
like the
depression, not
mouth
depression, but
breathing versus
this.
nose breathing, all that stuff's so fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so there are a lot of interesting things about breathing and new research that's happening, and people who are, way outside of our field, right?
Yeah.
So also larger volume of air is typical of the respiration of people with a higher BMI, body
Mm.
mass index,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that kind of makes sense because they've just got, you know, a bigger cardiac system because they're a
Yeah.
bigger person, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just like kids and women will breathe a little more quickly than men. So a
Yeah.
tall man will usually have a slower breath rate, just because your optimal breathing rate is also related to your total blood volume.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Very
So
cool. So
mhm.
one is I can't recommend your article enough. I think we only scratched the surface. I love the kind of the case studies work throughout there. It's really like I felt like after your article I had read a book, to be honest with you, that I got so much great material. and I always love to ask folks that I have the honor, like yourself, of interviewing, who's been a pioneer in this field and watched it grow over time and evolve over time. Is with all that experience, where do you think we'll be 5 to 10 years from now, as you look sort of into the future, of neurofeedback, biofeedback, the synergy that you've been talking about? Where do you see us going with this, or maybe just where you wish we would go with it? I'll let you take either of
Mhm.
those.
Well, I think we'll see more of the combined approaches,
Yeah.
right? And like from the beginning, the ISNR was started, well, just SNR at that time, was started just a year before Michael and I got in the field. So we always attended both meetings, the
Yes.
AAPB and what's currently the ISNR. And also my favorite is the Biofeedback Federation of Europe.
Yeah.
Like if you get a
Yes.
chance to go to the Biofeedback Federation of Europe, it's amazing. They're usually people from,
Poland next year, I think, is
that's right,
I'm
that's right,
hoping. My
Szczecin.
fingers are crossed to get there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a great meeting, and the Europeans are so much more open to
Yes.
non-drug approaches. So, and they're doing very innovative things. Yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of HRV. And of course, the reason HRV got so big was because the research got so solid,
Yeah.
and that's because of the Vishillos coming from Russia,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Such a
Yeah.
fascinating story.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So we have to be very grateful to that couple for
Yeah.
sharing their expertise because it was just because they really got everything going in
Yeah.
the U.S. And I think we'll see more combined approaches in the future, and also like the wearables market,
Yeah.
right? It's grown so quickly. Like we should be growing quickly because now we don't have to tell people what biofeedback is anymore, right? Because
Yeah.
they're wearing their rings and their watches and their
Yeah.
whatever. Um, so so the concept isn't new to anybody. The concept of neuroplasticity is no longer new.
Right.
Um, but I would say that, as a society, self-regulation isn't necessarily getting better. So I think we're needed more than ever.
Yeah.
And I think if we embrace some of the new technologies, like Eric Pepper always has good reviews on on new technology and
Yeah.
breathing and posture and such. So I think our field should be growing. Um, in fact, it's been declining. Like there used to be AAPB meetings that were like regularly over 1,000 people,
Mm.
right? And now it's more like 300, 350, right? For
Yeah.
the different organizations. So, but I think it should grow. And here's my hint. It's fine to write the textbooks.
Mm.
It's fine to publish the articles, but usually I'm preaching to the choir. What grows the field is articles everyday in
Mm.
everyday magazines and these days podcasts.
Yeah.
Because like the Lubars, their practice thrived in Tennessee after a woman in an article in Women's Day magazine,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And then they were flooded with referrals because if people know there's a non-drug option,
Right.
whether it's heart rate variability or neurofeedback, if they know there's a non-drug option, they're keen to use it.
Yeah.
And so get into the local media and let people know about what you do.
I love that. Well, I hope we
Yeah.
at least, like I said, with our focus on the podcast with heart rate variability, you're not by any stretch the first neurofeedback practitioner we have, but it's one of those, your articles really does a just beautiful job of really integrating and synergy. Sometimes it's an overused word, but when you use it, I thought it was like, I couldn't think of a better word to use. So Dr. Thompson, I just appreciate your work. I know probably I'm here today and part of folks like you 30, 40 years ago, bringing this science in and setting the stage for us to have these conversations now. So I just appreciate you, appreciate your work, and the door is always open. I bet there's another topic or two we could have fun discussing it at a future date. So you're always welcome back on the show. But thank you so much.
You're welcome, Matt, and I look forward to seeing you at the Biofeedback Federation of Europe next March.
Me too. We'll hopefully maybe share a meal in Poland. That sounds like a great opportunity. So thank you, and thanks for our listeners. As always, you can find show notes, information about Dr. Thompson's work. We'll link to the article at optimalhrv.com. And as always, everybody have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.